This is a news on Bakhtiar Sanova, and let's go through the main headlines. The United States and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding, marking a major step towards ending the Gulf conflict. President Ilham Aliyev highlights Azerbaijan's strong financial position at the Islamic Development Group meetings in Baku. And Ukraine has launched its largest drone attack on Moscow in 2 years. The United States and Iran have signed a memorandum of understanding at the G7 summit in Versailles, setting out a framework to end hostilities and begin talks on a permanent agreement. The deal, confirmed by both sides, includes an immediate ceasefire across all fronts, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and the lifting of U.S. sanctions.
US President Donald Trump signed the Iran Memorandum of Understanding at the Palace of Versailles on Thursday at the G7 summit, just prior to a dinner hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron. Before Trump's statement, Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Esmail Baghaei had announced that a memorandum of understanding with the United States has been finalized and signed electronically by both sides.
The Iran-US Memorandum of Understanding is now officially complete and finalized, since it has been signed by both sides. The Farsi document is similar to the English one and was signed by the other party.
The memorandum includes an immediate end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, the full resumption of maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, the lifting of a US blockade of Iranian ports, the waiving of US sanctions on Iran, the unfreezing of its assets, and a plan worth $300 billion for the economic rehabilitation of the Islamic Republic. Once implementation of the MOU begins, the US and Iran will start negotiations for a final deal. The document also states that the final agreement will be endorsed by a binding UN Security Council resolution. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said on X that the leaders of the US and Iran had signed the Memorandum of Understanding, and as a first step, Islamic Republic of Iran will instantly reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States of America will immediately lift the naval blockade. The meeting between American and Iranian delegations, headed by Vice President Vance and Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, is still expected to take place as planned Friday in Switzerland.
And more details are emerging about the deal agreed by the United States and Iran to end the 3 months of conflict. One of the Iran's state broadcaster has released the outline of the 14-point deal, which was signed remotely by Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian on Wednesday.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian added his electronic signature to the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States on Wednesday. Included in the 14-point document are the details of a 60-day ceasefire, which buys time for both sides to negotiate a final peace deal. It also includes a clause about Lebanon, which was a sticking point for Tehran during the negotiations. According to the text published by the IRNA state news agency, the document begins with a declaration on the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. With a 60-day time period, the document also includes a point stating that it could be extended upon mutual consent. On Washington's part, it states that the U.S. will begin the removal of its naval blockade and complete it fully within 30 days. In return, Iran will ensure the safe passage of commercial vessels without charging tolls for 60 days, only from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa. The document also states, according to Tehran, that the U.S. and regional countries will develop a plan for the reconstruction and economic project for Iran to the tune of $300 billion. Washington will also end all sanctions against Iran, including UN Security Council resolutions, IAEA resolutions, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions. According to the memorandum, Iran reaffirms that it will not procure or develop nuclear weapons. Both sides have agreed to resolve the issue of stockpiled enriched material according to a mechanism that will be mutually agreed upon. This will be supervised by the IAEA. In terms of energy sources, Washington has agreed to issue waivers for the export of Iranian crude oil, petroleum products, and derivatives, and all associated services. Additionally, the U.S. will release frozen or restricted funds and assets of Iran once the points of the deal are implemented. The last clause in the statement says that the final deal will be endorsed by a binding UN Security Council resolution, something Tehran has insisted on to ensure the U.S. holds up its end of the agreement. The chief negotiator for Iran, Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf, who is also the Speaker of the Parliament, emphasized this point in an interview on the state TV network IRIB, saying the memorandum is based on the principle of reciprocity. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai also said Iran and Washington are working through Pakistani mediators on the date and venue for the beginning of the peace talks, so that they can start as soon as possible. Turat Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
Lebanon has emerged as a key test of a new U.S.-Iran agreement aimed at easing tensions across the region. But with Israel, Hezbollah and Lebanon's leaders all signaling different positions, questions remain over how the deal will be implemented. Here is more.
Attention is focused on Lebanon after details emerged of a memorandum signed between the United States and Iran. The agreement calls for an immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, and says neither side should launch attacks or threats against the other. It also commits to respecting Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Meanwhile, Israel has not reacted to the signing of the peace deal, while a spokesperson for the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said any continuation of Israeli military operations in Lebanon would constitute a violation of the understanding. US President Donald Trump, at the G7 summit in France on Wednesday, said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu could use a softer touch in dealing with Hezbollah, reflecting Washington's concern that fighting in Lebanon could undermine the agreement.
You had a deal that was going to give them legally a nuclear weapon. And if that happened, Israel would have been blown away. And in all fairness to Bibi Netanyahu, who happens to be a good man, gets a little excited sometimes. But he happens to be a very good man. We've had an amazing partnership. He's been an amazing prime minister. We have a little dispute over Lebanon. I say, you can do a little softer touch, Bibi. You don't have to knock down a building every time somebody walks into it that's from Hezbollah.
Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem has rejected US-brokered proposals for pilot security zones, insisting any deal must guarantee reciprocal security. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu has fired back, insisting Israel is completely uncommitted to any US-Iran accord and reserves an absolute right to use military force. Lebanese leaders are expected to visit Washington in the coming weeks as negotiations continue towards a final settlement.
Israel has approved the expansion of a Jewish school for settlers in the center of Hebron in the West Bank. The move was announced on Wednesday by the finance minister of Israel. It comes a day after he said he had cancelled an arrangement giving the Palestinian municipality control over some planning and construction near Hebron's historic core. Palestinians say the decision violates the 1997 Hebron Agreement. UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned Israeli settler groups could be added to a global blacklist after a sharp rise in abuses against Palestinian children. The United Nations says violations against children in conflict zones reached a record high in 2025. The UN verified the death or injuries of more than 14,000 children worldwide, including 2,668 children killed in Gaza and 57 in the West Bank, making the Palestinian territory's worst affected area last year. The Middle East may be entering a new and highly uncertain phase after the United States and Iran electronically signed the so-called Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, aimed at ending more than 3 months of conflict, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and launching a new round of negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. However, President Donald Trump has stressed that the agreement is not final, warning that military action could resume if Tehran fails to comply with its commitments. To help us unpack the geopolitical implications of this developing story, we're joined by Enrique Casero, political analyst who speaks to us from Madrid, Spain. Mr. Casero, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Casero, President Donald Trump says the agreement is not final yet. What does that tell us about the durability of the current ceasefire?
It's whatever it is just another. I don't want to say goodwill document, but it's something as fragile as the next day is. So. If Iran does something and or the United States sees anything that could put in a risky situation the flowing of ships and through the Strait of Hormuz, or there is some sort of blocking, or there is any signal that the things are not going as much as Donald Trump expects. Okay, this is going to be, as we said in Spain, just wet paper, which means that that accord, that page and a half accord, is not gonna stand for too long.
Mr. Casero, could the agreement help stabilize oil prices and reduce fears of a global economic slowdown?
This is a question of the market, and we know that markets they play through the sensation, through the feeling. If they were really wanting to drop the price of the oil as soon as they can, they did. I think right now is the barrel is at a $6.84. It was at really above of 100. Right now is some sort of a very a very relief situation on the price of the oil barrel, which means that markets want this agreement more than probably Tehran or Washington D.C. And they're breathing right now, because otherwise inflation would be really critical for different countries, especially those that are not involved on the conflict.
In your view, what are the biggest obstacles that could derail the transition from a memorandum to a legally binding agreement?
First and foremost, I think perception is one of the greatest risks in here, because of course we have to count, as I said always, we have to count with Israel. And Israel is not happy with this situation, with this agreement. The first point of the agreement, indeed, is some sort of anecdote, but it is for real. The United States and their allies, and the first ally that comes to mind is Israel. Will seize on whatever the agreement says. So Israel is in a very critical position right now, because. This agreement really puts Israel in a very bad position, especially Netanyahu, because he's not gonna restrain from whatever he is doing in the south of Lebanon. He wants this, and not just Netanyahu. Whoever comes after Netanyahu is gonna keep that safety zone, that security zone, in the south of Lebanon or in the north of Israel, but the enemy is not defeated, so they can't count this situation as a victory. Neither the United States, of course not, nor Israel. So for whatever this situation can develop in any circumstances, Israel is not gonna be fine with it, because the real threat, the country was helping financially to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, I don't want to say destroyed, but it's not canceled. The risk is still there. So for this situation, Israel is not going to pay attention to whatever ceasefire is going to take. They're going to ask for taking place in South Lebanon, and I think that is the main risk right now, because Donald Trump doesn't want this war. Republicans are saying that okay, we've been dealing with this for 3 months and a half for just this, and it's such a incredible loss for the United States. We don't know what's going on with Iran. We're considering only the American arsenal, not the Iranian arsenal, which can make us think that it's not intact, but we want to use that word, healthy right now. So it's not even in stalemate, and that sensation that it's not even in a stalemate, which means it's a loss. I think the perception, as I said in the first place, perception is the highest risk.
Mr. Kasser, what implications could this deal have for U.S. relations with Gulf Arab states?
Again, the Gulf Arab states, with our we are Sunnis in their majority. They wanted to see the Shiites defeated, and they're not. We have to consider especially that Iran was attacking Emirates, and they were deploying different attacks on the region, with the United States asking for patience and asking for restraint in order not to develop a higher or a bigger conflict in the region. Right now, they can consider that as much as Israel does, the enemy has not been defeated. The risk is still there. So, as I said before, this is a very, very fragile balance in the situation of the region. So, I think the only people here that is happy right now and with cause is Iran.
So there has been controversy surrounding reports of a possible $300 billion reconstruction and investment framework. How politically sensitive is this issue in both Washington and the region?
We have to see what's the United States are not going to give away that money for free, and we already do know the amount of this supposed help, but we don't know what this help is going in exchange for. So I think it's very soon to see what's going on with what's going to happen with that money, what reconstruction does really mean, and I think it's not going to be a question easy to deal with right now. Probably, and I don't think it's gonna be otherwise. That reconstruction is gonna be delivered in a very, or that money is gonna be delivered in a very concrete places in order to help those areas and those countries to recover indeed. But right now, I think my perception of the situation is that everything is as fragile as, or it's not sensitive as air. I mean, I don't see anything more than a very nice curtain of smoke, if you want to call it that way. And I don't. In the first place, I don't believe that patient health is going to be fulfilled in all its terms. So, as I said, this is very fragile. The help is going to be, or the resources and the money is going to be, is built on a very fragile structure. So, we are dealing in a high situation of uncertainty right now.
Enrique Casero, thank you very much for your valuable insights and for talking to A News. We greatly appreciate your time and perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me.
G7 leaders have wrapped up their summit with both Washington and Paris praising international cooperation as attention turns to the newly announced US-Iran peace deal and plans to sign it in Switzerland on Friday. Ross Cullen reports from Evian.
Well, the G7 summit here in Evian in France has now come to a close after 3 days of discussions between the leaders from the UK, the US, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and Canada. The host President Emmanuel Macron gave a news conference after the conclusion of the summit, which he said had been held amid very difficult global circumstances, fragmentation, division and multiple crises and conflicts. But he said it had objectively been a success, with unanimous agreement from all of the leaders on 9 different communiques, different subject areas, including on Ukraine, Iran, economic growth and artificial intelligence. The US President Donald Trump also addressed the media after the end of the summit, saying that economic catastrophe had been avoided because of the agreement between the United States and Iran, the Memorandum of Understanding. He also hailed the US naval blockade as one of the most famous in history. That was what the United States imposed in response to Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump admitting that trying to recover already enriched uranium from inside Iran would be very difficult, and he also warned Tehran that if they did not abide by their commitments, the United States could very easily restart a bombing campaign. After the conclusion of the summit, Donald Trump was not immediately flying home. In fact, he'd been invited to dinner by Emmanuel Macron, but not in Evian. In fact, at the Golden Palace of Versailles, just outside Paris, as part of celebrations marking 250 years of US independence. Ross Cullen, A News in Evian.
We'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to News. At the NATO headquarters in Brussels on Thursday, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the alliance needs to return to its roots as a strong military alliance. He added that the United States will be clear about it both publicly and privately. At a meeting of NATO defense ministers, Hegseth called for a reboot of the 32-nation organization to turn it into NATO 3.0, capable of deterring any threat. His remarks came a few weeks after the United States told its allies that it would no longer supply certain warships and aircraft if one of them comes under attack. In his turn, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said the reduction of U.S. contributions to NATO's crisis forces has taken effect immediately, adding that other allies are stepping up to fill the gaps left by the U.S. move.
NATO 3.0 is post-Cold War recognition that it needs to go back to a real hardline military alliance that has real military capabilities capable of deterring right here on the continent and taking the lead for the conventional defense of Europe.
So what the US has announced already before is that they had to lower somewhat their contribution to the NATO force model. The question yesterday came up, is this immediate or not? It is immediate. However, why I'm a little bit reluctant to say this is because it is a planning tool. So what would happen in reality? If war would break out, let's assume that an Article 5 situation would emerge, then all allies, including the US, will max out what they can do.
EU lawmakers have approved sweeping migration reforms, including controversial return hubs outside the bloc for rejected asylum seekers. The package also tightens deportation rules, extends detention periods, and faces strong criticism from human rights groups. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where lawmakers have approved what supporters call the toughest migration reform in EU history. The vote clears the way for controversial return hubs outside the bloc for rejected asylum seekers and migrants ordered to leave Europe. Backed by center-right and right-wing lawmakers, the legislation is designed to boost deportations by allowing EU countries to transfer failed asylum seekers to third countries, even if they have no personal connection to the destination. The only exception? unaccompanied minors. Families with children could still be sent to the return hubs. Supporters say the current system is failing, with less than a third of return orders being effectively enforced. The legislation also extends detention periods for migrants awaiting removal from 6 months to as much as 2 years, with tougher entry bans and stronger powers for national authorities. European Commission officials say safeguards will remain in place and insist any return hubs must comply with international law and human rights standards. Several countries, including the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, and Denmark, are already exploring potential agreements with third countries to host the facilities. But the measure faces fierce criticism from human rights groups and progressive lawmakers. They warn the policy could create offshore detention centers and undermine asylum protections. Critics argue the legislation reflects a broader shift towards stricter migration policies across Europe as governments face growing political pressure to reduce irregular migration. The legislation still requires final approval by EU member states, but the vote does mark a major step toward a more restrictive European migration system. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
European Union leaders are meeting today in Brussels for a two-day summit dominated by discussions on Ukraine, economic pressures, and wider global security challenges.
European Union leaders gather in Brussels for a two-day summit set against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine and mounting global economic pressures. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to join talks on the evening of June 18th as leaders review support for Kyiv and outline the next steps in its EU accession process. Ukraine will remain a central focus, with leaders assessing progress following the opening of initial accession negotiations. Discussions are also expected on continued pressure on Russia, including sanctions policy, measures targeting its maritime networks, and preparations for a new package of restrictions. Beyond the war, leaders will turn to Europe's economic outlook, with competitiveness, energy costs, and wider global trade tensions high on the agenda. Concerns over market imbalances and unfair competition from major global players are expected to feature prominently. Negotiations will also move forward on the European Union's next long-term budget, with a first draft framework from the rotating presidency guiding discussions aimed at securing an agreement later this year. Security and defence will be another key focus as Europe prepares for the upcoming NATO summit, with emphasis on military readiness and strengthening the eastern flank. Leaders will also review developments in the Middle East, alongside migration policy implementation and efforts to tackle illicit drugs across the bloc. The summit runs from the 18th to the 19th of June.
Ukraine has carried out one of its largest drone attacks on Moscow. Russian officials say an oil refinery and several residential and industrial sites were damaged. The strikes came after a major wave of Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukraine as both sides step up aerial assaults in the ongoing war.
Ukraine launched a major drone offensives on Moscow in an attack that damaged a key oil refinery, sparking fires and sending debris falling across parts of the capital region. Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin and Russia's state news agency said it was one of the largest Ukrainian drone attacks on the Russian capital in recent years. Sobyanin said air defences shot down at least 194 drones targeting the capital overnight into Thursday. In the wider Moscow region, a high-rise residential building, an industrial facility and several private homes were also damaged, according to authorities. The strikes followed a major wave of Russian ballistic missiles and drone attacks on Kyiv, marking a further escalation of the air war between the two sides. Authorities in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Sumy said one person was killed in a drone strike. while air raid alerts were issued across much of the country.
The Dutch government has pledged $580 million in military support for Ukraine, focused on drones and air defense systems. Half of the money will be used to purchase drones from Dutch defense companies. The remaining $250 million will be channeled through the US-led Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List initiative, which supplies American-made weapons and systems to Ukraine. The package includes air defense equipment, missiles, ammunition for F-16 fighter jets and other systems. The latest pledge brings total Dutch contributions to $1 billion. Russia is hosting leaders from Southeast Asia as it looks to strengthen ties with the region. President Vladimir Putin welcomed the leaders of the ASEAN bloc to the city of Kazan for a two-day summit. Talks will focus on expanding trade, business and cooperation between Russia and ASEAN member states. Kremlin officials say the meeting marks 35 years of relations between Russia and ASEAN. The regional group has continued to engage with Moscow through regular high-level meetings, despite global tensions. To discuss the significance of the Russia-ASEAN commemorative summit and what it means for regional and global geopolitics, we're joined by Helmi Aji, an ASEAN affairs observer based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Mr. Aji, welcome and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aji, what makes this Russia-ASEAN summit particularly significant at this moment in international politics?
Well, I think the significance of this summit lies not only in ASEAN-Russia relations, but in what it tells us about the changing global balance of power. And the summit comes at a time when the international system is becoming increasingly fragmented and competitive. Relations between Russia and the West remain strained, and then there is US-China rivalry continues to shape regional dynamics, including here in Southeast Asia.
So Russia often speaks about building a multipolar world order. How does ASEAN fit into that vision?
That's an interesting question. For Russia, ASEAN represents an influential regional organization that is not aligned with any single major power. ASEAN's emphasis on strategic autonomy or centrality really resonates with Moscow's vision of a world where influence is distributed among multiple centers rather than dominated by one particular major power.
Mr. Raji, to what extent is this summit part of Moscow's broader strategy of pivoting toward Asia?
Yeah, I think it's part of Russia's engagement outside Europe, because since the deterioration of Russia's relations with Western countries in 2022, Moscow has intensified engagement with ASEAN partners, including ASEAN.
So what are the main economic objectives Russia hopes to achieve through deeper engagement with ASEAN countries?
I think the key here is this diversification. Russia is looking to diversify trade and investment relationships, expand exports, strengthen energy cooperation, and develop new technological partnerships with ASEAN and ASEAN member states. For Russia, ASEAN is not only a market, but also a gateway to one of the world's fastest growing economic regions.
So, Mr. Raja, energy cooperation remains a key issue. What opportunities and challenges exist in this area?
Well, Russia is a major player in energy, and the economic logic for this cooperation exists, particularly in food, oil, gas, even nuclear energy. However, geopolitical realities right now, sanctions, financial constraints, and logistical challenges can complicate implementation in the long run.
And also, how are ASEAN members balancing their relations with Russia, the United States, and China simultaneously?
Well, for ASEAN, the goal is not neutrality in every issue, but flexibility in managing relations with all major powers while preserving ASEAN centrality and strategic autonomy, so it will not follow one bloc or another major power. So the key is the centrality and strategic autonomy.
So, Ms. Raji, what do you think? Could this summit lead to tangible increases in trade and investment, or is it primarily symbolic?
Well, the summit certainly has symbolic values, especially as it marks the 35th anniversary of ASEAN-Russia relations. But the true measure of success will be whether discussions translate into concrete projects, investment, trade growth, or any other tangible outcomes.
And also, Russia and ASEAN have discussed greater cooperation in technology, cybersecurity, and digital development. How realistic are these ambitions?
There is certainly potential in areas such as cybersecurity, digital governance, education, and technology cooperation, but progress will depend on investment, regulatory compatibility, and trust among partners. And I think what I can see is that the ambition is real, but implementation will take time, and I think it will take processes to proceed.
Ms. Raji, how does the ongoing war in Ukraine affect ASEAN's approach toward Russia?
Well, this is a complicated situation for ASEAN members because many ASEAN countries supported UN resolutions emphasizing sovereignty and territorial integrity, but at the same time, ASEAN generally favors engagement and constructive dialogue while continuing cooperation in areas where common interests exist.
So, several ASEAN countries also focused on food and energy security. Can Russia become a more important partner in these sectors?
Yes, indeed, Russia can be a major partner because Russia is already a major exporter of energy resources, grain, fertilizers, and these sectors directly relate to ASEAN's concern regarding food and energy security right now.
And finally, Ms. Raji, what outcomes or agreements should observers watch for as indicators of the summit's success?
Well, I think we all should watch for concrete trade and investment initiatives, and as well as new agreements in energy, food, and technology, as well as the language used in the joint declaration regarding ASEAN centrality and the evolving international order. And I think the real story of this summit is not about ASEAN is choosing Russia, but it's how ASEAN continues to engage with all major powers, including Russia, while preserving its strategic autonomy and centrality in an increasingly multipolar world.
Ilham Aliyev, thank you very much for your valuable insights and for joining us. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for having me.
China's defense ministry has dismissed recent espionage allegations made by the Five Eyes Global Intelligence Sharing Alliance, calling the claims baseless and politically motivated. Our correspondent Abu Hayat Jafarova has more from Beijing.
China's Ministry of National Defense has rejected accusations that Chinese intelligence agencies are using online job platforms to recruit government employees from Western countries. Speaking at a briefing in Beijing, Defense Ministry spokesman Shan Si described the allegations as groundless and are driven by ulterior motives. His comments came after security agencies from the Five Eyes Alliance, which includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, issued a warning about China. They alleged that Chinese intelligence operatives were attempting to recruit people with access to sensitive information through online platforms. Chan said the claims about a so-called Chinese spy threat lack evidence. He added that some countries continue to view China through a Cold War lens and called for what he described as a more objective and rational approach towards China. Separately, U.S. authorities recently announced the seizure of 13 internet domains that they said were linked to efforts to gather information on behalf of Chinese intelligence services. Beijing has consistently denied espionage allegations made by Western governments, describing them as fabrications and attempts to smear China's image. Abu Hayat Jafarova, A News, Beijing, China.
Have you ever thought about how or where the World Cup trophy was made or how it came about? Well, here is the origin of its story, as football's most iconic prize is put on public display at the Rockefeller Center in New York.
The World Cup trophy stands as football's ultimate symbol of glory. but its story stretches back nearly a century. The original prize was introduced in 1930 as the Jules Rimet Trophy, designed by French sculptor Abel Lafleur. It depicted Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, and quickly became the defining symbol of international football. Over the decades, it acquired a history marked by both triumph and turmoil. During the Second World War, it was hidden in a shoebox beneath a bed in Rome by Italian football official Ottorino Barassi to keep it safe from Nazi forces. In 1966, just months before the World Cup in England, it was stolen from a public exhibition before being famously recovered by a dog named Pickles, wrapped in newspaper beneath a garden hedge in South London. Brazil took permanent ownership of the Jules Rimet Trophy in 1970 after becoming the first nation to win the World Cup 3 times. But in 1983, it was stolen again in Rio de Janeiro and never recovered, with many believing it was melted down. A new design had already been introduced in 1974, created by Italian artist Silvio Gazzaniga. The modern trophy, cast in 18-karat gold, depicts 2 figures lifting the globe, a symbol of football's global reach and unity. Today, it is lifted by World Cup winners on the pitch before being returned to FIFA, with champions receiving an official trophy for their own collections. From its origins to the present day, it remains one of the most coveted prizes in world sport.
After the break, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to News, and let's continue with more regional stories. At the Islamic Development Bank annual meeting in Baku, Azerbaijan unveiled ambitious plans for economic growth, green energy and regional connectivity, while highlighting its strong financial position and reconstruction efforts in Karabakh. Our correspondent Leila Rahimli has more from the venue.
We are reporting from the 2026 ISDB Group annual meeting here in Baku. There is a strong sense of purpose in the air today as global finance leaders gather to map out new regional strategies. The summit is already in full swing, and the big headline this morning was the opening address by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Taking the podium, the president set a highly confident tone. He emphasized that despite global shifts since Baku last hosted this event in 2010, Azerbaijan's stability remains unshaken. To back that up, he shared some striking financial metrics, highlighting that the country's foreign currency reserves now exceed its external debt by an impressive 20 times, with the national debt sitting at just 6% of GDP.
And by this figure, I think Azerbaijan is one of the leading countries with a very stable financial situation, balanced budget, and what also is appreciated by the leading rating agencies like Moody's and Fitch, which upgraded recently our ratings up to the investment grade, and with the prognosis forecast positive and stable. So we don't foresee any complications with respect to our economic development.
He also pointed to rapidly expanding energy map, noting that Azerbaijan now exports natural gas to 16 countries while aggressively pushing into green energy, with plans to deliver 8 gigawatts of solar and wind power to Europe by 2032. What tied all of these ambitious projects together was the theme of peace. President Aliyev noted that Azerbaijan and Armenia have now lived in peace for a full year, creating a stable environment for long-term reconstruction.
Today, already in Karabakh and Eastern Zangezur, almost 90,000 people live, work, study. We allocated from our state budget more than $15 billion to different infrastructure and housing projects, but from all sources, the volume of financing to liberated territories is close to $17 billion. Large-scale infrastructure projects are being implemented, including water storages, water canals, power stations, free international airports already commissioned, tunnels and bridges. And we're grateful to Islamic Development Bank Group for supporting our efforts in reconstruction of the liberated territories.
That theme of partnership resonated throughout the morning, especially during a very warm speech by ISDB Group President Mohammed Suleyman Al-Jassir. He praised Azerbaijan's resilience and proudly noted that the ISDB was the first multilateral development bank to support reconstruction efforts in liberated Karabakh.
And since Azerbaijan joined the bank in 1992, our cooperation has flourished with the Islamic Development Bank Group, approving approximately $1.8 billion for 84 projects in infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and social services. Projects like the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway and the Alat Free Economic Zone are not isolated national projects. They are regional arteries of trade that perfectly embody our annual meeting's theme, regional integration for sustainable prosperity.
It's clear that this summit is setting a very ambitious roadmap for the region's economic future. Well, that's all for now. We'll keep you covered as more deals come through. Reporting from the ISDB forum in Baku, I am Leyla Rahimli, together with our camera operator Ilkin Mehdiev for A News.
Baku is hosting an international summit bringing together ombudsmen and human rights officials from around the world to discuss the impact of emerging technologies on society and governance. A News correspondent Ilknur Seydamirova has more.
Artificial intelligence is advancing at a lightning speed, but is it leaving fundamental rights behind? In Azerbaijan, that question is now at the center of a major international response. Ombudsmen and heads of national human rights institutions from around the world are gathering here for the International Baku Ombudsman Summit. The high-level forum brings together representatives from the region, including Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, as well as Pakistan, Oman, Moldova, Ukraine, and Zambia. Around 30 countries are present at the summit. They are all here to examine how emerging technologies are reshaping governance, societies, and legal systems. Opening sessions will focus on the rapid rise of AI and its impact on public administration and human rights. Delegates focused on transparency, accountability, and protection of individual rights.
It is a challenge, definitely, because the development of AI goes faster than nation states develop own legislation. Having in mind that currently we have only a very comprehensive document related to AI regulation, it's European Efficient Intelligent Act, we have chance as national human rights institutions to see how we should deal with that, how we will push our authorities to create legal framework.
For example, in Kenya we have the lending applications which are using algorithms without any human intervention. So they decide that the amount that somebody is going to get without necessarily having to know who that person is. And sometimes they either get less than what is required or more because of that. And so because we want everybody to be treated fairly and equally, that is one of the areas that artificial intelligence normally perpetuate in exclusion.
On the sidelines of the main plenary session, participants discussed key issues including digital rights, data privacy and security, the future of work, and the growing need for digital literacy in the age of AI. Opening day of the summit also coincides with Human Rights Day in Azerbaijan, adding a symbolic weight to discussions on the rights in the digital age. The summit will conclude with the expected adoption of the Baku Declaration, a proposed framework aimed at guiding the ethical development of artificial intelligence and strengthening global standards on the transparency, justice, and accountability. Ilknur Seydamirova with Zohrab Shirinov reports from Baku, Azerbaijan.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has held bilateral talks with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in Kazan on the sidelines of the Russia-ASEAN Forum. Putin said relations between Russia and Turkey are developing and asked Fidan to convey his greetings to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov also attended the meeting. Fidan said there are several issues that need to be discussed between Turkey and Russia.
Добро пожаловать в Россию, зная, что у вас полезных контактов и не только.
Uzbekistan's national football team has made its long-awaited FIFA World Cup debut, taking on Colombia in the opening match of Group K. While the result did not go Uzbekistan's way, the game delivered a historic milestone for the nation and drew support from fans. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova has more.
History was made in Mexico City on June 18, as Uzbekistan played its first ever match at the FIFA World Cup. Ahead of the historic match, regional leaders attending Tashkent International Investment Forum offered their congratulations and support. Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev himself also offered support for the team. He even made special arrangements so families could cheer on the team, allowing state working hours start at 10 a.m. instead of 9. Kickoff was at 7 a.m. Tashkent time on Thursday. For the team's World Cup debut, it faced Colombia in its Group K opener at the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City.
It's the first ever World Cup and we are so excited to be here in Mexico and in this historic stadium where Maradona and Pelé won their World Cups, and we're so happy to face Colombia, a very good team, very high valued, elite team. And this is a big test for us.
Despite a valiant effort, Uzbekistan eventually fell 3-1 to the Colombian side. But they did show moments of promise, twice coming close to changing the outcome of the match. During the 60th minute, when Abbas Bekfazulayev scored the team's first ever goal at the FIFA World Cup. The result leaves Colombia top of the Group K with 3 points, while Portugal and DR Congo share second place after drawing 1-1. Uzbekistan currently sits fourth in the group and will now turn its attention to its next challenge against Portugal on June 23rd. It is Sivil Rajapov reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
This concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned to A News for more updates.